Welcome back to LeapTalk English, where real conversations help your English grow naturally. I'm Mary.
And I'm Albert. And Mary, I want to start today with a confession that I think a lot of people are going to relate to very strongly.
Go ahead, Albert. We're ready.
Last year, I spent 3 weeks struggling with something at work, something that was genuinely making me anxious every single day. And for those entire 3 weeks, I told absolutely nobody. Not my friends, not my family, not a single person.
And what happened after 3 weeks?
I finally mentioned it to a colleague, almost by accident, in passing, and she immediately said, "Oh, I know exactly how to handle that. I dealt with the same thing last year." It took her about 10 minutes to help me with something I had been carrying alone for 3 weeks.
10 minutes.
10 minutes. 3 weeks of unnecessary stress. 10 minutes of asking.
And I think most people listening right now have had a version of that exact experience, struggling alone with something that someone else could have helped with quickly, if only they had just asked.
But we don't ask. So many of us don't ask. And today we want to understand why.
Because it is not random. It is not simply stubbornness. The reasons people struggle to ask for help go surprisingly deep, and understanding them, really understanding them, can genuinely change how you move through difficult moments.
So today we are asking, why is asking for help so hard? And what does it actually take to get better at it?
As always, we are doing this in clear, natural B2 level English. Just relax, follow the conversation, and let your English grow naturally as you listen.
And stay with us until the end for our word tour, where we slow down and explain the most useful words and phrases from today's conversation.
And before we begin, we would love to hear from you. Is asking for help something you find easy or difficult? Leave us a comment. We genuinely want to know.
All right, let's get into it.
So, Albert, let's start with something that I think is really important to name clearly. Struggling to ask for help is one of the most common human experiences there is, and yet almost nobody talks about it directly.
Because talking about it would require admitting that you struggle, which is, ironically, exactly the thing that is hard to do.
The perfect trap.
The perfect trap. You need help with asking for help, but asking for help with asking for help requires asking for help.
Which is too many layers for a Monday morning.
Or any morning, honestly. But let's start with what I think is the deepest reason, the one that sits underneath most of the others.
Which is...
The equation many people unconsciously make between needing help and being inadequate.
Yes, this one is so fundamental.
Because somewhere, often very early in life, many people absorbed a message. Maybe it was spoken directly, maybe it was just modeled by the adults around them, but the message was clear. Capable people handle things themselves. Needing help means you are not capable enough.
And once that equation is in place, even if you never consciously agreed to it, asking for help starts to feel like an admission, a confession. I am not as capable as I should be.
And that feels threatening because for most people, their sense of competence is deeply tied to their sense of worth.
If I cannot handle this alone, what does that say about me?
And the answer the brain gives, quietly, quickly, automatically, is something unflattering. So rather than risk that answer, rather than risk the moment of exposure, people just keep going alone.
Even when going alone is clearly making things worse?
Even then, because the discomfort of struggling alone feels safer than the discomfort of being seen as someone who struggles.
And I want to say something clearly here, because I think this belief that needing help means being inadequate is not just wrong, it is exactly backwards.
Say more about that.
Research on high-performing people in business, in sport, in creative fields consistently shows that one of the most reliable markers of genuine competence is the willingness and ability to ask for help strategically, to recognize what you do not know, to identify who does know it, and to go directly to that person.
Asking for help is not the behavior of someone who lacks capability. It is the behavior of someone who has enough self-awareness to recognize their limits and enough confidence to work beyond them.
The people who never ask, who insist on figuring everything out alone, they are often not the most capable. They are sometimes just the most afraid. And the cost of that fear is enormous in time, in energy, in quality of work, and quality of life.
So that is the first layer, the belief that asking means inadequacy. But there's a second reason, and this one is about something different.
Fear of being a burden.
Right. It's not selfishness, it's almost the opposite. People who worry about being a burden are often deeply considerate people. They're aware that others have their own demands, their own stress, their own full lives.
And they don't want to add to that. They don't want to take up someone's time or energy. They don't want to be the person who always needs something.
Which sounds thoughtful, and in some context, it is. Being mindful of other people's capacity is genuinely respectful.
But when it becomes a reason to never ask, when it becomes a wall between you and the support that could genuinely help you, it stops being consideration and starts being isolation.
And the painful irony is this. Most people dramatically overestimate how much of a burden their request will be.
Studies on this are actually quite beautiful. When researchers asked people whether they would help a friend or colleague who came to them with a genuine need, the overwhelming majority say yes, not reluctantly, but willingly, often gladly.
Because helping someone you care about, being trusted with their difficulty, actually feels meaningful. It's not the imposition the person asking fears it will be.
And yet, the person who needs help imagines the opposite. They imagine inconvenience, impatience, a quiet wish that they hadn't come, which is almost never what the other person is actually feeling.
So there's a significant mismatch between the reality of asking, which is usually fine, and the imagined reality, which is often much more uncomfortable than the truth.
And then there's a third layer, one that I think is particularly relevant right now in 2026.
Which is?
Not knowing how.
And this one doesn't get enough attention.
It really doesn't, because a lot of people know intellectually that asking for help is a good idea. They believe it. They could write a very convincing essay about why it matters. And then the moment arrives when they actually need to do it, and they freeze.
Because they don't have the words. They don't know how to start the conversation without it feeling awkward or dramatic. They don't know how specific to be. They don't know whether to explain the full context or just ask directly.
And because they don't know how, they delay. The delay becomes avoidance. The avoidance becomes, once again, carrying it alone.
And this is something that genuinely can be learned. Asking for help is a skill, like any other. It has techniques, it has language, it gets easier with practice.
So what does actually help? What makes asking for help feel less impossible?
I think the first thing is reframing what asking actually signals about you. Not weakness, not inadequacy, but clarity. The clarity to know what you need and the confidence to go get it.
Because when you reframe it that way, asking stops feeling like a confession and starts feeling like a competent decision.
And the second thing is starting small. If asking for significant help feels too large, start with something genuinely small. A minor question, a brief request, something low stakes.
And notice what happens. Notice that the world did not end. Notice that the person you asked did not think less of you. Notice that the exchange felt almost certainly much lighter than you feared.
Because every small ask builds evidence against the story your brain has been telling. And evidence, accumulated over time, is how you change a belief.
And the third thing, and this one is perhaps the most practical, is learning a few simple phrases that make asking feel natural.
Because language matters enormously here. The way you frame a request changes how it feels to make it and how it lands for the person receiving it.
Instead of, I'm really struggling and I don't know what to do, which can feel dramatic and overwhelming, you can say something much simpler. I could use a second set of eyes on this. Or, do you have 5 minutes? I would love your perspective on something.
Or simply, I'm working through something and I think you might have useful experience with it. Would you be open to talking?
These phrases do something important. They frame the request as collaborative rather than desperate. They give the other person a clear and manageable ask rather than an open-ended emotional emergency.
And they make it easier for both people. Easier to give and easier to receive.
And the fourth thing, and I think this is the most important of all, is practicing the belief that you deserve support.
Not because you've earned it by being perfect, not because your problem is serious enough, not because you've struggled enough already.
But simply because you are a person, and people need other people. That is not a weakness. That is the most fundamental truth of human existence. We are not designed to be self-sufficient in isolation. We are designed neurologically, emotionally, evolutionarily for interdependence, for communities, for the exchange of support and care and knowledge.
Asking for help is not going against your design. It is working with it.
And the version of you that asks, that admits difficulty, that reaches towards someone else, that version is not smaller than the one who carries everything alone.
It is braver and wiser and far more likely to actually get through whatever it is you are facing.
Okay, let's go into our word tour.
Let's do it.
Word tour. First word, inadequate. When you feel inadequate, you feel that you are not good enough, that you fall short of what is needed or expected in a situation.
For example, many people avoid asking for help because deep down they fear it will make them look inadequate. Or, feeling inadequate in a new job is completely normal and does not mean you made the wrong choice. Repeat after us. Inadequate.
Inadequate. Next, competence. Competence means having the skill, knowledge, and ability to do something successfully and effectively.
For example, true competence includes knowing when to ask for help, not just when to work alone. Or, she built her competence over years by consistently seeking feedback and learning from people more experienced than her. Repeat, competence.
Competence. Next, burden. A burden is something heavy that you carry, physically or emotionally. When you feel like a burden to someone, it means you believe your needs or problems are too much for them to handle.
For example, he hesitated to ask for support because he did not want to become a burden to his already busy friends. Or, the fear of being a burden stops many people from reaching out when they genuinely need connection. Repeat, burden.
Burden. Next, mismatch. A mismatch is a significant difference or incompatibility between two things that are being compared, often where one does not match what was expected.
For example, there is often a mismatch between how difficult we imagine asking for help will be and how it actually feels in reality. Or, the mismatch between her expectations and the actual outcome left her feeling confused but relieved. Repeat, mismatch.
Mismatch. Next, reframe. To reframe something means to think about it or present it in a different way, changing the perspective or context so that it has a different meaning.
For example, reframing asking for help as a sign of confidence rather than weakness made it feel much less threatening to her. Or, sometimes the most useful thing a therapist does is help you reframe a painful experience in a way that allows you to grow from it. Repeat, reframe.
Reframe. Next, interdependence. Interdependence means a relationship where two or more things depend on each other mutually, each needing and supporting the other.
For example, human beings are wired for interdependence. We are not meant to navigate life entirely alone. Or, healthy relationships are built on interdependence, not independence or dependence, but a genuine balance of both. Repeat, interdependence.
Interdependence. And finally, collaborate. To collaborate means to work together with one or more people toward a shared goal, combining different skills, knowledge, or perspectives.
For example, framing a request for help as an invitation to collaborate makes it feel less like admitting failure and more like building something together. Or, sometimes the most useful thing a therapist does is help you reframe a painful experience in a way that allows you to grow from it. Repeat, collaborate.
Collaborate.
And those were today's Word Tour words and phrases.
Together, they capture everything we explored today. Why asking for help feels so hard, where that difficulty comes from, and what it actually looks like to move through it with a little more grace and a little more courage.
And wherever you are today, if there is something you've been carrying alone that you do not have to carry alone, consider this your gentle reminder. You are allowed to ask.
You always were.
This is Albert.
And this is Mary. Thank you so much for listening to LeapTalk English. We will see you in the next one.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.